Every Wednesday, I made soup for my husband, and every Wednesday, he said he was feeding the homeless. I believed him for 3 years until the day I followed him and discovered the truth. What I found that afternoon didn't just break my heart, it shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. I'm glad you're here to follow my story until the end. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my truth has traveled. I never imagined that at 70 years old, I'd be standing in a parking lot watching my entire life crumble before my eyes. My name is Dorothea Blackwell, and I've lived in Riverside Falls, Montana for 47 years. This small town nestled in the valley between the Bitterroot Mountains had been my home since I married my husband, Leonard, back in 1977. We raised our son Marcus here, watched him grow up, get married, and start his own family. I thought I knew every street corner, every friendly face, every secret this town held. I was wrong. It all started innocently enough, the way most devastating discoveries do. 3 years ago, on a crisp October Wednesday, I was in my kitchen preparing my famous butternut squash soup. The recipe had been passed down from my grandmother Estelle, who'd learned it from her mother before her. It was thick and creamy, seasoned with sage from my garden and a hint of nutmeg that made it taste like autumn itself. Leonard came into the kitchen just as I was ladling the soup into our largest stockpot. He was 72 then, still handsome with his silver hair and those deep-set brown eyes that had first caught my attention at a church social all those decades ago. He'd retired from his job as a civil engineer 2 years prior, and we'd been enjoying a quiet life of morning walks, afternoon reading, and Wednesday soup days. "That smells divine, Dottie," he said, using the nickname he'd called me since our first date. He kissed my cheek, and I felt the familiar warmth of his lips against my skin. "Are you making extra again?" "Of course," I replied, stirring the pot carefully. "I always make enough for the church potluck on Thursday. You know Reverend Patricia expects my soup every week now." Leonard shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a gesture I'd come to recognize over 46 years of marriage. It meant he wanted to ask me something but wasn't quite sure how I'd respond. "Actually, Dottie, I was wondering if I could take some of that soup with me this afternoon. There's a new homeless shelter that opened up on Cascade Street, just past the old lumber mill. I'd been meaning to volunteer there, and I thought maybe I could bring them some hot food." I turned to look at him fully, surprised but pleased. Leonard had always been a good man, community-minded and generous. During his working years, he'd volunteered with Habitat for Humanity and served on the town council. Retirement had made him restless, and I'd been hoping he'd find a new purpose to fill his days. "That's wonderful, Leonard," I said, genuine warmth flooding through me. "Of course you can take some soup. In fact, why don't I make a double batch? I can always make more for the church tomorrow." His face lit up with a smile that made him look 10 years younger. "You're too good to me, Dottie. Always have been." I spent the next hour preparing enough soup to feed an army. I packed it carefully in thermal containers, the kind that would keep food hot for hours. Leonard loaded everything into the back of his old Ford pickup truck, the same one he'd been driving for 15 years. He refused to buy a new vehicle, saying the old one still ran just fine and there was no sense in being wasteful. "I'll be back before dinner," he called out as he climbed into the driver's seat. "Don't wait up if I'm a bit late." Sometimes these things run longer than expected. I waved from the front porch of our modest ranch-style home, watching the truck disappear down Elderberry Lane. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across our well-tended lawn, and I felt a sense of contentment settle over me. My husband was out doing good in the world, feeding those less fortunate. What wife wouldn't be proud? That was the first Wednesday. It became a ritual after that. Every Wednesday morning, I'd wake up early and start preparing soup. Sometimes it was the butternut squash recipe. Other times I'd make my chicken and wild rice soup, or the hearty beef and barley that Leonard particularly loved. I'd experiment with different vegetables from our garden: carrots, celery, tomatoes, green beans. I'd simmer bones for hours to make rich broths, knead dough for fresh bread to accompany the meals. Leonard would help me load the containers into his truck, always with that same expression of gratitude and purpose on his face. He'd kiss my cheek, tell me I was the best wife a man could ask for, and drive off toward what he said was the homeless shelter on Cascade Street. The routine continued for months. Then a year. Then 2 years. Then 3. I was proud of my husband's dedication. I'd brag about it to my friends at the Riverside Falls Senior Center. My Leonard has been volunteering at the homeless shelter every Wednesday for 3 years now, I'd tell Martha Pennington while we played cards. I make the soup, and he delivers it. He's such a good man. Martha would smile and nod, but I noticed something in her expression that I couldn't quite identify. A flicker of something, concern? Pity? I dismissed it as my imagination. Our son Marcus lived across town with his wife, Felicia, and their 2 teenage children. Marcus worked as an accountant at Morrison & Associates, the largest firm in Riverside Falls. He was a good son, visiting us every Sunday for dinner. But he'd become distant lately, distracted during our conversations, always checking his phone with a worried expression. "Is everything all right at work, dear?" I'd ask him. "Everything's fine, Mom," he'd reply, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Just busy season, you know how it is." Felicia seemed strained too, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced with something brittle and forced. She'd help me clear dishes after Sunday dinners, and I'd catch her staring out the kitchen window with tears in her eyes. "Felicia, honey, are you sure everything's okay?" I'd press gently. "Of course, Dorothea," she'd say, blinking rapidly. "I'm just tired. The kids have been keeping me on my toes." But I knew something was wrong. A mother, and a mother-in-law who cares, can always sense when her family is in distress. Still, whenever I brought it up to Leonard, he'd wave off my concerns. "They're adults, Dottie. They'll work through whatever it is. We need to trust them to handle their own problems." So I let it go, focusing instead on my Wednesday soup ritual. It gave me purpose, knowing that my cooking was feeding people who needed it. Leonard would come home from the shelter with stories about the people he'd met, a veteran down on his luck, a young mother with 2 children, an elderly man who'd lost his pension. The stories broke my heart and filled it at the same time. But looking back now, I realize I should have paid more attention. I should have noticed the small inconsistencies, the tiny details that didn't quite add up. Like how Leonard never smelled like the homeless shelter when he came home. I'd volunteered at similar places in my younger years, and I remembered the distinct smell, a mixture of unwashed bodies, industrial cleaner, and institutional food. Leonard always came home smelling like cologne. Expensive cologne. Or how he never had any stories about the other volunteers. Every charity organization I'd ever been part of had a core group of dedicated volunteers who became friends, who you'd mention by name. But Leonard never talked about working alongside anyone. It was always just him, alone, serving soup to grateful recipients. Or how his Wednesday absences grew longer. What started as 3-hour trips gradually extended to 4 hours, then 5, then 6. He started leaving earlier and coming home later, always with apologies and explanations about how the shelter needed extra help, how there were more people to feed than usual. I didn't question it. Why would I? Leonard was my husband of 46 years. We'd built a life together, raised a son together, weathered storms together. You don't suspect someone you've loved for nearly half a century of deceiving you. But then came the Wednesday that changed everything. It was late April, 3 years and 2 months after Leonard had started his volunteering. The weather had finally turned warm after a brutal Montana winter, and the lilacs in our yard were just beginning to bloom. I was making Italian wedding soup that morning, one of Leonard's favorites with tiny meatballs and spinach floating in a light broth. I was at the stove, stirring the pot, when my cell phone rang. It was Agnes Merriweather, my closest friend from the senior center. Agnes was 68, a widow who'd moved to Riverside Falls 5 years ago to be closer to her daughter. "Dorothea, dear," Agnes said, her voice breathless with concern. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm in a terrible bind. I was supposed to drive my daughter to her doctor's appointment in Missoula this afternoon. You know she's been having those dizzy spells, but my car won't start. The mechanic says it's going to take at least until tomorrow to fix. Is there any way Leonard could give us a ride? I know he usually volunteers on Wednesdays, but this is rather urgent. My first instinct was to say yes, of course Leonard would help. That's the kind of man he was, always willing to lend a hand to a neighbor in need. But then I hesitated. Actually, Agnes, Leonard's already left for the shelter. He left about 20 minutes ago. There was a pause on the other end of the line. The shelter? Which shelter, dear? The homeless shelter on Cascade Street. He's been volunteering there every Wednesday for the past 3 years. I'm surprised I haven't mentioned it to you before. Another pause, longer this time. Dorothea, honey, there is no homeless shelter on Cascade Street. The wooden spoon I'd been holding clattered into the pot, splashing soup onto the stovetop. What do you mean there's no shelter? I mean exactly that. Cascade Street is mostly old warehouses and abandoned buildings from when the mill closed down. There's that antique shop on the corner, and the veterinary clinic, but no homeless shelter. The only shelter in Riverside Falls is the Samaritan House, and that's clear across town on Riverside Avenue. My heart began to beat faster. Maybe I'm remembering the street name wrong. Maybe he said something else. Maybe, Agnes agreed, but her tone suggested she didn't believe it any more than I did. Listen, don't worry about the ride. I'll figure something out. But Dorothea, maybe you should ask Leonard about exactly where he's been going. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the soup bubbling on the stove. My mind raced through the past 3 years, examining every Wednesday with new eyes. All those hours, all those trips, all those containers of soup I'd so carefully prepared. Where had they really been going? Where had Leonard really been going? I turned off the stove and walked to the window, looking out at the empty driveway where Leonard's truck had been parked just half an hour ago. The lilacs swayed in the breeze, their purple blooms almost painfully beautiful against the blue Montana sky. Everything looked normal, peaceful, exactly as it should be. But something was very, very wrong. I made a decision in that moment, standing in my kitchen with soup cooling on the stove and doubt blooming in my heart like poison flowers. I was going to follow my husband. I was going to find out where he really went every Wednesday, what he really did with all that soup I'd been making, and why he'd been lying to me for 3 years. I grabbed my purse and car keys, my hands shaking slightly. My car, a modest Honda Civic that I used for errands and trips to the senior center, was parked in the garage. I'd driven it just yesterday to get groceries, so it was full of gas and ready to go. But I couldn't just rush out and follow Leonard immediately. He had too much of a head start, and he'd recognize my car if I drove right behind him. I needed to be smart about this. I pulled out my phone and opened the GPS app that Marcus had installed for me last year. Leonard's phone was connected to our family plan, and Marcus had set it up so we could see each other's locations in case of emergency. Leonard knew about this feature. We joked about it, actually, calling it our old people tracking system, in case one of us wandered off and forgot where we parked. He'd never thought I'd use it to spy on him. My finger hovered over his name in the app, and I took a deep breath before tapping it. A map appeared, showing a blue dot that represented Leonard's current location. He was moving, the dot traveling along roads I recognized, past the elementary school, through downtown, heading toward the eastern part of town. But he wasn't heading toward Cascade Street. He wasn't even heading in that general direction. Instead, the blue dot was moving toward Willow Creek Road, a winding street on the outskirts of town where new developments had been built over the past 5 years. Expensive developments, with large houses set back from the road on spacious lots. The kind of neighborhood that Leonard and I could never afford on our retirement income. What was he doing there? I watched the dot move for another few minutes until it finally stopped. The location showed an address, 4782 Willow Creek Road. I zoomed in on the map, trying to see what kind of building it was, but the satellite image just showed a large house surrounded by trees. My hands were still shaking as I started my car and backed out of the garage. I told myself there could be a perfectly innocent explanation. Maybe there was a community center in that neighborhood that distributed food to the homeless. Maybe Leonard had gotten the street name wrong and had been going to Willow Creek all along, not Cascade Street. But even as I thought these things, I knew I was grasping at straws. The drive across town took 15 minutes. I followed the GPS directions, my stomach churning with a mixture of dread and determination. Part of me wanted to turn around, go home, pretend I'd never made that phone call to Agnes. Ignorance truly is bliss, and I'd been blissfully ignorant for 3 years. But I couldn't unknow what I now knew. I couldn't unask the questions that were now screaming in my mind. And I couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering if my husband's weekly volunteering was actually something else entirely. Willow Creek Road was every bit as upscale as I'd imagined. The houses were large and new, with perfectly manicured lawns and late-model cars in the driveways. It was the kind of neighborhood where young professionals lived, doctors, lawyers, business owners. People with money and ambition. People like our son, Marcus. The thought struck me suddenly, and I felt my chest tighten. Marcus lived across town, in a more modest neighborhood near his office. But what if he'd moved? What if he'd bought a new house and hadn't told us? That seemed unlikely, but then again, everything about this situation seemed unlikely. I drove slowly down Willow Creek Road, checking house numbers. 4780, 4781. And there, on the left side of the street, was 4782. It was a beautiful house, I had to admit. 2 stories, painted a soft blue-gray with white trim. A wraparound porch with hanging baskets of flowers. A detached garage with what looked like living quarters above it. The yard was immaculate, with flower beds bursting with early spring blooms and a vegetable garden visible in the back. And parked in the driveway, right next to a silver Mercedes SUV, was Leonard's old Ford pickup truck. I pulled over about 3 houses down, parking under the shade of a large oak tree where I could see 4782 but wouldn't be immediately visible to anyone looking out the windows. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and my mouth had gone completely dry. What was Leonard doing here? Whose house was this? I sat there for several minutes, trying to decide what to do next. Should I march up to the front door and demand answers? Should I call Leonard and confront him over the phone? Should I just wait and watch? While I was deliberating, the front door of the house opened, and my heart nearly stopped. Leonard emerged, carrying 2 of my thermal soup containers. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was a woman I'd never seen before. She was young, probably in her late 30s or early 40s, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was beautiful in a natural, effortless way, wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt. She was laughing at something Leonard had said, her hand resting casually on his arm. And then she did something that made my blood run cold. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed my husband on the cheek. Not a friendly peck, but a lingering kiss that spoke of familiarity and affection. Leonard smiled at her, the same warm smile he'd given me for 46 years, and touched her face gently with his free hand. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not draw air into my lungs. I watched, frozen in horror, as Leonard carried the soup containers to his truck while the woman waved goodbye from the porch. He loaded them into the back, the same containers I'd filled with soup that morning, the same containers I'd filled every Wednesday for 3 years. He wasn't taking soup to a homeless shelter. He was bringing soup to another woman. My husband of 46 years had been having an affair. But even as that devastating realization crashed over me, I noticed something else that made the situation impossibly worse. As Leonard drove away and I sat there in shock, another vehicle pulled into the driveway of 4782 Willow Creek Road. It was a familiar silver Honda Accord. The same car that was parked in my son's driveway every Sunday when we had family dinner. It was Marcus's car. And as I watched through tears that were now streaming down my face, my son got out of the car, walked up to that beautiful house with the blue-gray paint and white trim, and let himself in with his own key. The woman who had kissed my husband, the woman Leonard had been bringing my soup to every Wednesday for 3 years, wasn't just his mistress. She was my son's mistress too. I don't remember driving home that day. One moment I was sitting in my car under the oak tree on Willow Creek Road, watching my son disappear into that house, the same house where my husband had just been kissing another woman, and the next moment I was pulling into my own driveway, my cheeks wet with tears I didn't remember crying. The garage door opener felt impossibly heavy in my hand. Everything felt heavy, my arms, my legs, my heart most of all. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine still running, staring at the wall of our garage where Leonard had hung tools in neat rows. Everything organized, everything in its place, everything exactly as it should be. Except nothing was as it should be. Nothing would ever be as it should be again. I finally turned off the car and walked into the house through the garage entrance. The kitchen still smelled like Italian wedding soup, though the pot had long since cooled on the stove. I looked at it, at the soup I'd made with such care that morning, at the tiny meatballs I'd rolled by hand, at the fresh spinach from our garden that I'd washed and chopped. All of it destined for a woman I didn't know. A woman who was sleeping with both my husband and my son. The thought made my stomach heave, and I barely made it to the sink before I was sick. I gripped the edge of the counter, retching until there was nothing left, until I was just gasping and sobbing and wondering how my entire life had become a lie. When I finally caught my breath, I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the small mirror Leonard had hung beside the kitchen window. The woman staring back at me looked ancient, not 70, but 100. Her eyes were red and swollen, her skin pale and papery, her mouth twisted in an expression of anguish I'd never seen on my own face before. I looked like someone whose world had just ended. Because it had. I needed to sit down. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what to do with this terrible knowledge that was burning in my chest like acid. I made my way to the living room and collapsed onto the sofa Leonard and I had picked out together 15 years ago. We'd spent weeks shopping, sitting on every sofa in every furniture store between here and Missoula, until we finally found this one, a soft tan microfiber with deep cushions that Leonard said was perfect for afternoon naps. We'd christened it that very first day, curling up together to watch the sunset through our picture window. Now I couldn't look at it without feeling sick. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and opened the GPS app again. Leonard's blue dot was moving, heading back across town. Coming home. I watched it progress along familiar streets, past the elementary school, through downtown, turning onto Elderberry Lane. He'd be here in less than 5 minutes. Panic seized me. I wasn't ready to see him. I wasn't ready to look at his face, to hear his voice, to pretend everything was normal when my entire world had just shattered. But I couldn't leave. Where would I go? This was my house too, my home for 47 years. I heard the rumble of his truck pulling into the driveway. The engine cut off. The truck door opened and closed. His footsteps on the front porch. The jingle of his keys. And then Leonard walked through the front door, and I had to look at him. This man I'd loved for 46 years, this man who had promised to forsake all others, this man who had been bringing my soup to his mistress every Wednesday while I sat at home feeling proud of his charity work. "Dottie," he called out cheerfully, just like always. "I'm home. Sorry I'm a bit late, there were more people at the shelter than usual today." The lie rolled off his tongue so easily, so naturally. How many times had he lied to me? How many hundreds of lies over 3 years? I stood up from the sofa, and he must have seen something in my face because his smile faltered. "Dottie? Are you all right? You look like you've been crying." "I'm fine," I heard myself say, though my voice sounded strange and distant. "Just feeling a bit under the weather. I think I'll lie down for a while." I walked past him toward our bedroom, unable to look at him for more than a second. If I looked at him, I'd either start screaming or collapse completely, and I wasn't ready to do either. I needed time to think, to plan, to decide what to do with this devastating knowledge. "Do you want me to make you some tea?" Leonard called after me, concern evident in his voice. "Or I could heat up some of that soup for lunch?" The mention of the soup nearly broke me. I stopped in the hallway, my hand on the wall for support. "No," I managed to say. "No soup. I just need to rest." I closed the bedroom door behind me and sat on the edge of our bed, the bed Leonard and I had shared for decades, The bed where we'd laughed and made love and held each other through good times and bad. Now I couldn't imagine ever sleeping in it again. I pulled out my phone again, my hands still shaking, and opened my text messages. I needed to talk to someone, needed to share this burden before it crushed me completely. But who? Who could I tell about this without destroying what was left of my family? Not Martha Pennington, she'd spread it all over the senior center within hours. Not Reverend Patricia, as much as I respected her, she'd want me to pray about it and try to work things out, and I wasn't sure that was possible. Not Agnes Merriweather, sweet Agnes, who'd inadvertently started this whole horrible discovery. I couldn't drag her into this mess. My finger hovered over Marcus's name in my contacts. My son. My only child. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd been so proud of. How was he involved in this? Why was his car at that house? Was he having an affair with the same woman as Leonard? The thought made me physically ill again, but I forced myself to consider it rationally. Marcus had been married to Felicia for 20 years. They had 2 beautiful children, my grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, aged 16 and 14. Marcus had always seemed devoted to his family. He'd never been the type to stray, had never even seemed interested in other women. But then again, Leonard had never seemed like the type to have an affair either. We'd had a good marriage, or so I'd thought. Regular intimacy well into our 60s, frequent expressions of love and affection, shared interests and hobbies. We held hands during our morning walks. We still said, "I love you," every night before bed. Had all of that been a lie too? I heard Leonard moving around in the kitchen, the clink of dishes and the sound of water running. He was probably cleaning up the soup pot, putting away the ingredients I'd left out. Playing the role of the helpful, considerate husband. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was from Marcus. "Hi Mom. Something came up at work. Felicia and I won't be able to make Sunday dinner this week. Sorry for the short notice. Love you. Sunday dinner. Our weekly family tradition. The 4 of us sitting around the dining room table, talking about our weeks, sharing stories, being a family. Had Marcus been lying during all those dinners too? When he'd told us about his work, about the kids' activities, about his plans for the future, had he been hiding this massive secret the entire time? I typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on, "That's fine, dear. Hope everything's okay at work. Love you too." What I wanted to write was, "I know. I saw you. I saw your car at 4782 Willow Creek Road. I saw you walk into that house like you owned the place. Who is she? How long has this been going on? How could you do this to your wife, to your children, to your father, to me?" But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed more information first. I needed to understand the full scope of this betrayal before I confronted anyone. I spent the rest of that afternoon lying on our bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with questions and possibilities. Each one was worse than the last. Was this woman just having separate affairs with Leonard and Marcus? Or did they know about each other? Were they sharing her? The thought was so repulsive I had to push it away before I was sick again. How long had this been going on? 3 years, since Leonard started his Wednesday volunteering? Or longer? Had there been signs I'd missed, clues I'd been too trusting to see? Did Felicia know? Is that why she'd seemed so strained lately, so brittle and sad? Was she suffering in silence while her husband destroyed their family? And most importantly, who was this woman? What kind of person could do this? What kind of person could sleep with both a father and his son? Around 5 o'clock, Leonard knocked softly on the bedroom door. "Dottie? Are you feeling any better? I'm starting dinner. Do you want to come out and eat with me?" "I'm not hungry," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think I'm coming down with something. Maybe you should sleep in the guest room tonight so you don't catch it." There was a pause. "Are you sure? I don't mind risking it. I can take care of you." The tender concern in his voice, was it genuine? Or was it just another lie in a long series of lies? "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I'll be fine. I just need rest." After what felt like hours of silence, I heard Leonard's footsteps retreating down the hallway. Eventually, I heard the distant sound of the television in the living room, the low murmur of the evening news. I got up and locked the bedroom door. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in bed, unable to sleep, unable to cry anymore, unable to think about anything except what I'd seen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman kissing Leonard's cheek. I saw Marcus's car pulling into the driveway. I saw 3 years of Wednesdays flash before my eyes, all those mornings making soup, all that pride I'd felt in Leonard's charitable work, all that love and trust I'd had for both my husband and my son. All of it built on lies. Sometime around 3 a.m., I made a decision. I couldn't confront them yet, I was too emotional, too raw. But I couldn't keep living in ignorance either. I needed to know everything. I needed to understand the full extent of this betrayal. I needed to investigate. The next morning, I waited until Leonard left for his Thursday morning golf game with his buddies from the senior center. It was another one of his regular routines, as predictable as the Wednesday soup deliveries. Every Thursday at 8 a.m., he met Charlie Dobson and Frank Martinez at the Riverside Falls golf course for 18 holes. Or did he? Now I couldn't trust anything. Maybe there was no golf game either. Maybe that was another cover for more time with his mistress. But when I checked the GPS app, his blue dot was indeed at the golf course. At least that much was true. I had until at least noon before he'd be home. That gave me 4 hours. I started in his office, a small room off the living room where Leonard kept his desk, his files, his computer. I'd rarely gone in there over the years, respecting his privacy and his space. He handled all our finances, paid all the bills, managed our retirement accounts. I trusted him completely. That trust now felt like the worst kind of foolishness. I sat at his desk and opened his laptop. The password prompt appeared, and my heart sank. I'd never needed to know his password before. We'd had separate computers, separate phones, separate spaces. But then I remembered, when Marcus had helped us set up our smartphones last year, he'd insisted we all use the same password recovery system. Just in case, he'd said. If something happens to one of you, the other needs to be able to access important accounts. I pulled out my phone and found the shared password document in our family cloud storage. There it was, Leonard's laptop password, Dottie 1977, the year we got married. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. The laptop opened to his desktop, which was meticulously organized just like everything else in Leonard's life. Folders labeled finances, medical, house, golf league, volunteer work. Volunteer work. I clicked on it, my hands shaking slightly. Inside were dozens of documents, but none of them had anything to do with homeless shelters. Instead, I found files with names like Willow Creek Schedule, Weekly Meal Plans, Renovation Receipts, and Madison, Expenses. Madison. Was that her name? I opened the Willow Creek Schedule file first. It was a detailed calendar going back 3 years, every Wednesday marked with 3 p.m., soup delivery. But there were other entries too. Entries I hadn't known about. Tuesday mornings, coffee at Willow Creek, Friday afternoons, garden work, Saturday evenings, dinner, when M works. My husband wasn't just visiting this woman on Wednesdays. He was seeing her 3 or 4 times a week. Multiple times a week for 3 years. The room started spinning, and I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. How had he hidden this from me? When had he found the time? Then I remembered, Tuesday mornings, he told me he was meeting Charlie Dobson for coffee at the diner. Friday afternoons, he said he was working in the community garden near the senior center. Saturday evenings, he claimed he had monthly poker games with his old engineering colleagues. All lies. All cover stories so he could spend time with Madison. I opened the weekly meal plans file next. It was a document listing every soup recipe I'd made over the past 3 years, with notes beside each one, Madison loved the butternut squash. Madison requested more of the chicken wild rice. Madison says the minestrone is her favorite. She'd been requesting my recipes. She'd been eating my soup, prepared with my love and care, delivered by my husband, and she'd been giving feedback on them like some kind of food critic. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and fierce. This woman, this Madison, had been enjoying the fruits of my labor while sleeping with my husband. She'd probably laughed about it. Probably thought it was amusing that the stupid old wife was unknowingly cooking for her husband's mistress. The renovation receipts folder was even more revealing. Inside were invoices from contractors, receipts from home improvement stores, and bank statements showing large transfers. Leonard had spent over $80,000 in the past 3 years on renovations to the house at 4782 Willow Creek Road. $80,000 of our retirement money. Money that was supposed to be for our future, for our medical expenses as we aged, for emergencies. He'd been spending it on fixing up his mistress's house. I looked through the bank statements more carefully, my accounting training from my secretarial days coming back to me. Leonard had been very clever about it, taking small amounts from different accounts, spreading out the withdrawals so I wouldn't notice any single large expense. He'd categorized them as home maintenance and vehicle repairs and medical expenses. But they weren't. They were all going to Madison. And there was something else in those bank statements that made my blood run cold. Regular monthly deposits into the Willow Creek House account from another source. I traced the account number through several documents until I found the source. It was Marcus's personal account. My son wasn't just visiting this woman. He was paying for her too. He was contributing money, our family's money, money that should have been going to support his wife and children, to maintain his father's mistress. Or was she Marcus's mistress too? The question kept circling in my mind like a vulture. I spent the next 2 hours going through every file on Leonard's computer. What I found painted a picture so disturbing, so incomprehensible, that I had to keep reminding myself it was real. Leonard and Madison had been in a relationship for almost 4 years. It had started a year before the Wednesday soup deliveries began. They'd met at a community event, according to some early emails I found. She was a widow, her husband having died in a car accident 5 years ago. She had no family in Riverside Falls, no close friends, no support system. Leonard had swooped in to help her. To be there for her. And somehow that had turned into an affair. The truly sick part was that Leonard had introduced Madison to Marcus about 2 years ago. I found emails between them discussing it. I think Marcus and Madison would really get along. They have a lot in common, both love hiking, both interested in photography. Maybe we could all have dinner together sometime? And they had. There were photos on Leonard's computer, photos I'd never seen, of the 3 of them at restaurants, at parks, hiking in the mountains. Leonard, Marcus, and Madison. Smiling and laughing like the happiest trio in the world. Like a family. That's when I understood the full horror of it. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't even just 2 separate affairs happening simultaneously. Leonard had intentionally introduced his mistress to our son. And at some point, Madison had started a relationship with Marcus too. Whether Leonard knew about that part, I couldn't tell from the files. But they were all entangled together in this sick triangle. My husband and my son were sharing a woman. They were both in love with her. They were both spending our family's money on her. They were both living secret lives that revolved around Madison while pretending to be devoted family men at home. I found Madison's Facebook profile through one of the links in Leonard's email. Her privacy settings were tight, but I could see her profile picture, the same beautiful woman with the dark hair I'd seen yesterday. Her bio said she was a freelance graphic designer and listed Riverside Falls, Montana as her location. But there was something else. Something that made everything even worse. In the small section of visible friends, I saw Felicia's smiling face. My daughter-in-law was Facebook friends with my son's mistress. Did Felicia know? Was she complicit somehow? Or was she as blind as I had been? I heard the garage door opening. Leonard was home early. I quickly closed all the files and shut down the laptop, my heart racing. I needed more time, needed to process everything I'd learned, needed to figure out my next move. But I'd run out of time. Dottie? Leonard called from the kitchen. Are you feeling better today? I cut the golf game short because I was worried about you. I walked out of his office, closing the door behind me. Leonard was standing in the kitchen, still wearing his golf clothes, looking at me with what appeared to be genuine concern on his face. How did he do it? How did he look at me with such apparent love and care while living this enormous lie? I'm feeling a bit better, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Thank you for coming home early. He smiled and walked over to kiss my forehead. I forced myself not to flinch, not to pull away. I was thinking, he said, maybe we could have a quiet lunch together? I could make us some sandwiches, and we could eat out on the porch. It's such a beautiful day. A beautiful day. He wanted to have a romantic lunch with me while his mistress was probably waiting for him somewhere, wondering why he'd cut his Thursday morning short. That sounds lovely, I heard myself say. We ate lunch on the porch, just like he'd suggested. Leonard talked about his golf game, about a funny story Charlie Dobson had told, about plans for our upcoming anniversary trip to Glacier National Park in July. Our 47th anniversary. Almost half a century of marriage. And he was planning to celebrate it with me while maintaining a mistress who lived across town in a house he'd spent $80,000 renovating. I nodded and smiled and made appropriate responses, all while my mind was racing. I needed help. I needed advice. I needed to talk to someone who could help me figure out what to do. After lunch, I told Leonard I was going to the senior center to play cards with Martha Pennington. It was a plausible excuse. I went to the senior center at least once a week. That's good, Leonard said approvingly. Getting out will help you feel better. I'll see you at dinner? Yes, I agreed. I'll be home by 5. But I didn't go to the senior center. Instead, I drove to the other side of town, to a modest neighborhood where my daughter-in-law Felicia's best friend Sarah lived. Sarah Chen was a divorce attorney, one of the few in Riverside Falls. She and Felicia had been friends since high school, and she'd joined us for several family dinners over the years. If anyone could give me advice on what to do, it would be Sarah. I knocked on her door, praying she was home, praying she could help me. Sarah answered after the second knock, looking surprised to see me. Mrs. Blackwell? Is everything okay? No, I said, and then the tears I'd been holding back for the past 24 hours finally broke free. No, everything is very much not okay. Sarah, I need your help. I need legal advice. And I need you to promise me that you won't tell Felicia I was here. Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to concern. Of course. Come in. Let me make some tea, and you can tell me everything. And so I did. I sat in Sarah Chen's living room and told her everything, the 3 years of Wednesday soups, following Leonard yesterday, seeing him kiss Madison, seeing Marcus's car, finding all the files on Leonard's computer. The money, the lies, the secret life my husband and son had been living. By the time I finished, Sarah's face had gone pale. Mrs. Blackwell. Dorothea, this is. She paused, collecting her thoughts. This is one of the most complicated situations I've encountered. The financial aspect alone, Leonard using marital assets to support another woman, that's grounds for a very advantageous divorce settlement. But the fact that your son is involved too. What do I do? I asked, my voice breaking. How do I handle this? Sarah was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. First, you need to gather more evidence. Photos, documents, everything you can find. Second, you need to open your own bank account that Leonard doesn't have access to. Transfer some money into it, money that's yours, that he can't touch. Third. She hesitated. Third, you need to talk to Felicia. She deserves to know. I don't know if she knows already, I admitted. She's friends with Madison on Facebook. What if she's part of this somehow? There's only one way to find out, Sarah said gently. You have to ask her. That evening, I called Felicia. My hands shook as I dialed her number, my heart pounding with dread at what I might discover. "Hi, Dorothea," Felicia answered, her voice strained. "How are you feeling? Marcus told me you weren't well yesterday." "I'm feeling better," I lied. "Felicia, I need to talk to you. In person. Without Marcus. Can you meet me tomorrow morning for coffee?" There was a long pause. "Is this about Marcus?" she asked quietly. My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Another pause, longer this time. When Felicia spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. "I know, Dorothea. I've known for months. I didn't know how to tell you." I met Felicia the next morning at the Copper Kettle, a small cafe on the opposite side of town from where either of us normally spent time. It was the kind of place where we wouldn't run into anyone we knew, no neighbors, no church friends, no one from Marcus's office or the senior center. Just two women who needed to have an impossible conversation without the whole town watching. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a corner booth far from the windows. The morning sun was filtering through the cafe's vintage lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the worn wooden tables. It would have been peaceful under different circumstances. Beautiful, even. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and the coffee I'd ordered sat untouched in front of me, growing cold. Felicia arrived exactly on time. I watched her walk through the door, and my heart broke all over again. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, her clothes hanging loose on a frame that had clearly lost weight. This wasn't the vibrant, cheerful woman who'd married my son 20 years ago. This was someone who'd been suffering for a long time. She slid into the booth across from me, her eyes already red-rimmed and watery. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, two women who'd been betrayed by the men they loved, connected by pain we'd both been carrying in silence. "How long have you known?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Felicia wrapped her hands around the coffee mug the waitress had brought her, staring down at it like it held answers. 6 months, she said quietly. "I found out 6 months ago, in October. Marcus left his phone on the bathroom counter when he was in the shower. It buzzed with a text message, and I glanced at it without thinking. The message was from someone named Madison. It said, 'Can't wait to see you tonight. Dad's bringing your favorite soup.' My stomach clenched. Dad. She'd called Leonard Dad. I confronted Marcus that night, Felicia continued, tears now streaming down her face. He broke down immediately. Told me everything. About Madison, about how he'd met her through Leonard 2 years ago, about how they'd fallen in love." She laughed bitterly. Fallen in love. Like it was some romantic comedy instead of adultery. "Did he tell you about Leonard?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Felicia nodded, wiping her eyes with a paper napkin. "Yes. He told me that Leonard had been seeing Madison for years. That Leonard had introduced them because he thought Marcus needed a friend going through similar life stresses. Marcus said it just happened. That he and Madison connected, that they couldn't help their feelings." The waitress approached our table, took one look at our faces, and quietly refilled our coffee mugs before disappearing again without a word. "What did you do?" I asked. "After he told you?" "I didn't know what to do," Felicia admitted. I was in shock. My husband was having an affair with his father's mistress. How do you even process that? Who do you tell? Who would even believe it? She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "I wanted to tell you, Dorothea. So many times over the past 6 months, I wanted to call you and tell you everything. But Marcus begged me not to. He said it would destroy you, that you'd never recover from knowing what Leonard had done. He said Leonard loved you and that what he had with Madison was completely separate, that it didn't take away from his marriage to you." I felt anger rising in my chest. "That's a lie. You can't love someone and betray them like this. You can't dedicate years of your life to lying to someone's face and call it love." I know, Felicia said miserably. I know that now. But at the time, I was so confused, so broken. Marcus swore he would end it with Madison. He promised me it was over, that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he wanted to save our marriage. He cried, Dorothea. He got down on his knees and begged me to give him another chance. Did he end it? I asked, though I already knew that answer too. Felicia shook her head, fresh tears falling. No. He tried, or at least he said he tried. But by November, I caught him texting her again. Lying about working late. Making excuses to leave the house. Every time I confronted him, he'd have another explanation, another promise that it was really over this time. She pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots she'd saved. Text messages between Marcus and Madison that made me feel physically ill. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. Talking about Marcus eventually leaving Felicia, about Madison and Marcus buying a house together somewhere far from Riverside Falls, about starting fresh. And then there were the messages about Leonard. Madison writing things like, "Your dad brought the most amazing beef stew today. You're so lucky to have a father who cares so much." And Marcus responding, "I know. Sometimes I feel guilty that we're both with you. But Dad seems happy. You seem happy. Maybe this is just how it's supposed to be." I pushed the phone away, unable to read anymore. This is sick. This whole situation is sick. They're justifying it to themselves, making it seem normal. There's more, Felicia said quietly, taking her phone back. Things I discovered when I started digging deeper. Dorothea, this isn't just about an affair. There's something bigger going on. She pulled out a folder from her purse and spread several documents across the table between us. Bank statements, property records, business filings. Marcus has been embezzling money from his accounting firm, Felicia said, her voice hollow. Small amounts at first, but it's gotten bigger over the past year. He's taken almost $150,000 from client accounts. The coffee shop seemed to tilt around me. What? I found the evidence 2 months ago, Felicia explained, pointing to the bank statements. See these deposits into Marcus's personal account? They correspond with withdrawals from his firm's client trust accounts. He's been cooking the books, moving money around, falsifying records. I'm an accountant too, remember? I worked at Morrison & Associates before I had Emma. I know how their systems work, and I know what legitimate transactions look like. These aren't legitimate. I stared at the numbers swimming before my eyes. My son, my honest, hard-working son who I'd been so proud of, was a thief. Why? I whispered. Why would he do this? For her, Felicia said bitterly. For Madison. Look at these property records. Marcus bought the house at 4782 Willow Creek Road 18 months ago. Not Madison. Marcus. The deed is in his name. He purchased it for $485,000, and that's where most of the stolen money has gone. The rest went to renovations, furniture, everything Madison wanted. My mind was reeling. But Leonard spent $80,000 on renovations. I saw the receipts on his computer. Leonard doesn't know Marcus bought the house, Felicia said. Marcus told Leonard that Madison inherited it from her late husband. Leonard thinks he's helping maintain Madison's property. He has no idea his son actually owns it. The complexity of the deception was staggering. Marcus had bought a house for his mistress and was letting his father believe he was helping maintain it. Both men were pouring money into the same property, supporting the same woman, neither one fully aware of what the other was doing. Does Madison know? I asked. That Marcus bought the house? Oh, she knows, Felicia said with a harsh laugh. She's the one who asked him to do it. I found emails between them. Madison told Marcus she wanted a place that was truly theirs, where they could build a life together. She played him, Dorothea. She manipulated him into buying her a house and then let Leonard think he was being her hero by paying for renovations. I felt like I was drowning in information, each new revelation pushing me further underwater. What about you? What have you been doing for the past 6 months while all this was happening? Felicia's hands clenched around her coffee mug. Surviving. Trying to protect Emma and Tyler. They don't know anything, thank God. They still think their father is working late, that everything's normal. I've been keeping up appearances at home, going through the motions of being a family, all while knowing my marriage is a lie. Why didn't you leave him? Where would I go? Felicia asked, her voice breaking. Marcus controls all our finances. I haven't worked in 16 years, I've been a stay-at-home mom since Emma was born. I have no income, no savings of my own. And I was terrified that if I left, if I exposed everything, he'd fight me for custody of the kids. His lawyer friends would help him destroy me in court. I'd lose my children. She was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. I've been trapped, Dorothea. Trapped in my own home with a man I don't recognize anymore. Watching him lie to our children's faces every day. Pretending everything's fine when nothing is fine. I reached across the table and took her hand. You're not trapped anymore. We're going to figure this out together. Felicia looked up at me with desperate hope in her eyes. How? How do we fix this? How do we stop them? Tell me everything, I said. Every detail you know about Madison, about this arrangement, about the money. If Marcus is embezzling from his firm, that's a crime. If he's using stolen money to buy property and support a mistress, that's evidence. We need to document everything. For the next 2 hours, Felicia told me everything she'd discovered over the past 6 months. She'd been conducting her own investigation, quietly gathering evidence, documenting every lie and betrayal. Madison Reeves was 42 years old, originally from Seattle. She'd moved to Riverside Falls 8 years ago with her husband, David Reeves, a software engineer who'd taken a remote position to enjoy Montana's lifestyle. David had died in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving Madison with a substantial life insurance payout, nearly $800,000. But that money was gone now. Madison had burned through it all within 3 years, spending lavishly on clothes, travel, and a failed attempt to start a graphic design business that never got off the ground. By the time Leonard met her 4 years ago at a community fundraiser, she was nearly broke and desperate. Leonard was her savior, Felicia explained. Or at least that's how she saw him. A wealthy retired engineer with money to spare and a kind heart. She targeted him deliberately. You think she planned this from the beginning? I asked, horrified by the implication. I know she did, Felicia said firmly. She pulled out her phone and showed me more screenshots, these from Madison's private Facebook messages to a friend in Seattle. Messages that Felicia had accessed through Marcus's computer. Read these. I read message after message that made my blood run cold. Met this sweet old guy at a charity thing. He's loaded and clearly bored with his wife. Easy target. Leonard is so generous. Bought me a new laptop today and didn't even blink at the price. His wife must be a complete bore if he'd rather spend money on me. Best part? He introduced me to his son. Marcus is gorgeous and successful. Maybe I can have them both. LOL. 2 Blackwell men keeping me comfortable. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a trashy romance novel, but hey, at least it's a well-funded trashy romance novel. Each message was dated, chronicling Madison's calculated seduction of my husband and then my son. This wasn't a woman who'd accidentally fallen into complicated relationships. This was a predator who deliberately targeted my family for financial gain. She's a con artist, I said, my voice shaking with rage. A common con artist. Yes, Felicia agreed. But she's also genuinely in love with Marcus. Or at least, she's convinced herself she is. The more recent messages show that her feelings for him became real, which is why she pushed him to buy the house. She wants a real future with him. What about Leonard? I asked. Does she love him at all? Felicia shook her head. From what I can tell from the messages and emails, Leonard is her ATM machine. She manipulates him with affection and attention, but there's no real emotion there. She calls him old reliable when talking to her friend. Says he's good for home repairs and a steady stream of gifts, but nothing more. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. My husband, who thought he was in love, who'd been betraying his marriage for years, was nothing more than a financial resource to this woman. A mark. A fool. There's something else you need to know, Felicia said, her voice dropping even lower. Marcus told me that Leonard is planning to leave you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Marcus said Leonard has been talking about it for the past 6 months. Divorce. He wants to ask you for a divorce so he can be with Madison openly. Marcus has been trying to talk him out of it, not because he cares about you and Leonard's marriage, but because he doesn't want to share Madison. He wants Leonard out of the picture entirely. I sat back in the booth, my head spinning. Leonard was going to ask me for a divorce. After 46 years of marriage, after all the promises and vows and decades of life built together, he was going to leave me for a woman who saw him as nothing but a wallet. When? I managed to ask. When was he planning to do this? Marcus said Leonard wanted to wait until after your anniversary trip in July. He didn't want to ruin that. He was going to tell you in August. 4 months away. I had 4 months before my husband was planning to blow up our entire life. We can't let that happen, Felicia said urgently. We can't let them destroy everything. We need to act first. What are you proposing? Felicia leaned forward, and for the first time since entering the cafe, I saw strength in her eyes instead of just pain. We expose them. All of them. Marcus, Leonard, and Madison. We document everything, the affair, the embezzlement, the property fraud. We take it to the police, to Marcus's firm, to everyone who needs to know. We blow up their little arrangement before they can hurt anyone else. That will destroy our family, I said quietly. Our family is already destroyed, Felicia replied. We're just the only ones admitting it. Emma and Tyler deserve to know the truth about their father. You deserve to divorce Leonard and take everything you're entitled to. And Marcus deserves to face consequences for embezzling from his clients and betraying everyone who trusted him. She was right. I knew she was right. But the weight of what she was proposing, exposing my husband and son as adulterers, thieves, and liars, felt impossibly heavy. I need to think about this, I said. I need time to process everything. We don't have much time, Felicia warned. Marcus's firm is conducting their annual audit next month. When they find the missing money, and they will find it, Marcus will try to cover his tracks. He might even try to frame someone else for the theft. We need to act before that happens. I nodded slowly. You're right. But we need to be smart about this. We need a plan. I've been working on one, Felicia said, pulling out another document from her folder. I've been documenting everything for months. I have copies of bank statements, emails, text messages, property records, everything we need to prove what they've done. I've stored it all in a secure cloud account that neither Marcus nor Leonard can access. What about Madison? I asked. If we expose this, she'll try to run. Or she'll manipulate them into covering it up. That's why we need to move fast, Felicia said. And that's why we need one more piece of evidence. We need to catch them together. All 3 of them. We need proof that can't be denied or explained away. How do we do that? Felicia checked her phone. According to Marcus's calendar, there's a dinner planned at the Willow Creek house this Saturday night. All 3 of them, Marcus, Leonard, and Madison. Marcus told me he has to work late on Saturday, but I know the truth. He'll be at that house. Saturday is 3 days away, I said, my mind already racing with possibilities. 3 days to prepare, Felicia agreed. I know a private investigator, someone Sarah Chen recommended when I first discovered the affair. He can document everything. Photos, video, audio recordings. Evidence that will hold up in court. I thought about Leonard, about how he'd looked at me that morning over breakfast, smiling and asking what I wanted to do this weekend. How he'd kissed my forehead and told me he loved me, all while planning a dinner with his mistress and our son just days away. Okay, I said finally. Let's do it. Let's expose them. Felicia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We're going to get through this, Dorothea. Both of us. We're going to make sure they face consequences for what they've done. What about Emma and Tyler? I asked. How do we protect them from all this? Felicia's expression grew pained. I don't know if we can completely protect them. They're going to be hurt no matter what. But at least if we control the narrative, if we tell them the truth before they hear it from someone else, we can help them process it. And we can show them that standing up to betrayal and doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is what integrity looks like. We spent another hour planning. Felicia gave me the name and number of the private investigator, a man named Raymond Torres who specialized in infidelity cases. She also gave me copies of all the evidence she'd gathered, stored on a USB drive that I tucked safely in my purse. Don't keep this at home, Felicia warned. Leonard might go through your things if he suspects anything. Keep it somewhere safe. A safe deposit box at the bank, maybe, or with Sarah Chen. I'll give it to Sarah, I agreed. She's already involved, and she'll know how to use it legally. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Felicia grabbed my arm. Dorothea, I need you to know something. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I should have come to you the moment I found out, but I was scared and confused and I thought I could handle it on my own. I should have trusted you. I pulled her into a hug, this woman who'd been my daughter-in-law for 20 years, who'd given me 2 beautiful grandchildren, who'd been suffering in silence while trying to protect everyone but herself. You're telling me now, I said. That's what matters. We're in this together now. I left the cafe feeling different than when I'd arrived. I was still hurt, still betrayed, still reeling from the magnitude of what I'd learned. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in days, purpose. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman taking back control of her life. I drove to Sarah Chen's office next. She listened to everything Felicia had told me, examined the documents on the USB drive, and made detailed notes. This is solid evidence, Sarah said, her expression grave. The embezzlement especially, that's a felony. Marcus could face serious prison time if he's convicted. And the financial infidelity from Leonard gives you grounds for a very favorable divorce settlement. I don't want Leonard's money, I said. I just want my dignity back. You deserve both, Sarah replied firmly. Leonard spent your joint retirement savings on his mistress. That money should be returned to you, along with penalties. You shouldn't have to suffer financially because your husband chose to betray you. She made copies of everything, storing the originals in her office safe. Then she helped me open a new bank account at a different bank from where Leonard and I had our joint accounts. I transferred $50,000 from our savings, money that was legally mine as much as his, into this new account. This is your safety net, Sarah explained. If things get ugly when you file for divorce, and they probably will, you need to have resources Leonard can't access or freeze. That evening, I went home to our house on Elderberry Lane. Leonard was in the kitchen making dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, one of his specialties. He smiled when he saw me. There's my beautiful wife, he said cheerfully. How was your day? Did cards with Martha help you feel better? I looked at this man who'd shared my bed for 46 years. This man who'd held my hand through the deaths of my parents, who'd coached Marcus's Little League team, who'd danced with me at our son's wedding. This man I'd trusted with my heart, my life, my future. This stranger wearing my husband's face. It was fine, I said, forcing a smile. I'm feeling much better. Thank you. Good, he said, stirring the sauce. I was worried about you. You've seemed off the past few days. Off. I'd seemed off because I discovered my entire life was a lie, but I couldn't tell him that. Not yet. Just a bug, I said. But I'm over it now. We ate dinner together, making small talk about neighborhood news and plans for the weekend. Leonard mentioned he had some errands to run on Saturday afternoon. Errands? I asked initially. What kind of errands? Oh, just some things I need to pick up at the hardware store. Maybe grab lunch with Charlie. Nothing exciting. Lies. More lies. He'd be at Willow Creek Road, having dinner with Madison and Marcus while I sat at home, the faithful wife who suspected nothing. That sounds nice, I said. Maybe I'll have Agnes over for the afternoon. We can watch some movies. Perfect, Leonard said, smiling at me across the table. It's good to see you getting back to normal, Dottie. You had me worried. That night, lying in bed beside my husband, I'd allowed him back into our bedroom to avoid suspicion. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Saturday. In 3 days, Raymond Torres would be at Willow Creek Road with his cameras. In 3 days, we'd have undeniable proof of what Leonard, Marcus, and Madison had been doing. And then everything would change. Leonard reached over and took my hand, interlacing his fingers with mine the way he'd done for thousands of nights over the years. I love you, Dottie, he murmured sleepily. You know that, right? I know, I whispered back, tears sliding silently down my face in the darkness. But I didn't believe him anymore. The 3 days before Saturday felt like 3 years. Every moment I spent with Leonard was an exercise in restraint, smiling when I wanted to scream, making conversation when I wanted to demand the truth, lying beside him at night while rage burned in my chest like a furnace. But I held it together. I had to. Everything depended on catching them all together, on documenting the full scope of their betrayal with evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. Raymond Torres, the private investigator Felicia had hired, called me on Thursday evening while Leonard was outside watering the garden. Raymond was a former police detective, now in his 50s, with a calm, professional demeanor that I found reassuring. Mrs. Blackwell, I wanted to brief you on Saturday's operation, he said. I'll be positioned in a vehicle across the street from 4782 Willow Creek Road starting at 5 p.m. I'll have telephoto camera equipment and audio recording devices. The goal is to document who arrives, how long they stay, and capture any interactions visible through windows or on the property. Will you be able to see inside the house? I asked, keeping my voice low. Partially, Raymond replied. I've driven by the property, and there's a large dining room window that faces the street. If they have dinner there, and based on the layout, that's the most likely location, should be able to get clear photographs. I'll also attempt to capture audio if they spend any time on the porch or in the yard. What if they see you? They won't, Raymond assured me. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know how to be invisible. But Mrs. Blackwell, I need to prepare you for something. These situations are always emotional, but seeing the evidence, actually viewing photographs of your husband and son with this woman, it's going to be difficult. Are you sure you're ready for that? Was I ready? I thought about the past 3 years of Wednesday soups. The countless hours I'd spent cooking and preparing meals for my husband to deliver to his mistress. The pride I'd felt in Leonard's charitable work. The family dinners where Marcus had sat at our table, eating my food, hugging his children, all while hiding this monstrous secret. I'm ready, I said. I need to see it. I need proof that I'm not imagining this, that it's really as bad as I know it is. Friday afternoon, Felicia called me. I told Emma and Tyler I'm taking them to visit my sister in Billings this weekend, she said. They're confused because it's sudden, but they don't suspect anything. I need to get them away from here before everything explodes. That's smart, I agreed. They don't need to witness this. Dorothea, Felicia's voice cracked slightly. What if we're making a mistake? What if exposing this destroys more than it fixes? I understood her fear. We were about to detonate a bomb in the center of our family. The fallout would be catastrophic, affecting not just Leonard, Marcus, and Madison, but Emma, Tyler, and everyone who knew us in Riverside Falls. We're not the ones who destroyed our family, I reminded her gently. They did. We're just refusing to keep their secrets anymore. Your children deserve a father who lives with integrity, even if they have to learn the hard way that he hasn't been that person. And I deserve to live the rest of my life with dignity, not as a fool who never knew her husband was living a double life." Felicia was quiet for a moment. "You're right. I know you're right. I'm just scared." "So am I admitted. But we're doing this together. We're stronger together." Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect Montana spring day that mocked the darkness of what I knew was coming. Leonard was in an unusually good mood, humming while he made coffee, kissing my cheek as he set a mug in front of me. "What should we do today before my errands this afternoon?" he asked. "We could go for a walk around the lake. The wildflowers should be blooming by now." The casualness of his deception was staggering. He was planning his romantic dinner with his mistress and our son in just hours, and he wanted to spend the morning taking a leisurely walk with his wife. "That sounds lovely," I said, matching his cheerful tone. "Let me get dressed." We walked around Peterson Lake, following the 3-mile trail that wound through pine forests and along the water's edge. Leonard held my hand, pointed out birds and flowers, told me stories about his golf games with Charlie and Frank. He seemed genuinely happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Because he was living the life he wanted, I realized. He had a wife who took care of him and maintained his respectable image in the community. And he had a mistress who made him feel young and desired. He had everything, and he thought he'd never have to choose. "I love you, Dottie," he said as we completed the loop back to our car. "I hope you know how much you mean to me. How grateful I am for our life together." I looked at him, this man I'd spent most of my adult life loving. "Do you ever regret anything, Leonard? Any choices you've made?" He seemed surprised by the question. "Regret? No, not really. I've been blessed with a wonderful wife, a successful son, a good life." "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering," I said softly. "If you had the chance to do things differently, would you?" Leonard pulled me close and kissed my forehead. "I wouldn't change a thing," he said firmly. "You've made me the happiest man in the world." The lies came so easily to him now. He believed them himself. We got home around noon. Leonard made us sandwiches for lunch, then disappeared into our bedroom to shower and change clothes. When he emerged, he was wearing his good slacks and the blue button-down shirt I'd bought him for Christmas. He'd shaved and put on cologne, the expensive cologne I'd noticed before but hadn't questioned. He was dressing up for her. "I'll probably be gone until around 9 or 10 tonight," Leonard said, grabbing his truck keys. "Charlie wants to grab dinner after we finish our errands. You'll be okay here by yourself?" "Agnes is coming over at 6, I lied smoothly. "We're going to watch some old movies and eat popcorn. You know how she loves those classic musicals." "That's great," Leonard said, smiling. "You two have fun. I'll see you tonight." He kissed me goodbye, a real kiss, tender and familiar, and then he walked out the door to his truck. I watched from the living room window as he drove away, his hand raised in a final wave. I waited until his truck disappeared around the corner, then I called Raymond Torres. "He just left," I said. "He should arrive at Willow Creek Road within the next 20 minutes. "I'm already in position," Raymond replied. "I'll keep you updated." The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. I tried to distract myself with television, with books, with cleaning the house. Nothing worked. I kept checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for updates from Raymond. At 6:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from Raymond. Subject arrived at 5:47 p.m. Entered property with key. Currently inside. Leonard had a key to Madison's house. Of course he did. At 6:42 p.m., second vehicle arrived. Silver Honda Accord, license plate matches Marcus Blackwell's registration. Subject entered property with key. My son had a key too. They both had keys to the house Marcus had secretly purchased for their shared mistress. At 7:03 p.m., all three subjects visible in dining room. Dinner in progress. Currently capturing photographs. I stared at that message for a long time. Somewhere across town, my husband and my son were sitting at a dinner table with Madison Reeves, eating and laughing and playing house. 3 people who'd collectively destroyed 2 marriages, stolen over $200,000, and built an elaborate web of lies that had lasted years. At 7:34 p.m., subjects moved to porch. Clear audio and visual. Recording everything. At 8:12 p.m., physical affection observed between all parties. Extensive photographic evidence obtained. I felt sick reading that message. I didn't want to know the details. I didn't want to imagine what physical affection between all parties meant. But I knew I'd have to look at the evidence eventually. I'd have to see exactly what I was dealing with. At 8:45 p.m., my phone rang. It was Raymond. "Mrs. Blackwell, I have everything we need," he said. Multiple clear photographs of all 3 individuals together, audio recordings of conversations that explicitly reference the affair and the financial arrangements, and video footage of intimate behavior that leaves no doubt about the nature of these relationships. "This is solid, incontrovertible evidence." "Thank you," I managed to say. "What happens now?" "I'm going to compile everything into a comprehensive report with all supporting materials," Raymond explained. "I'll have it ready by Monday morning." Sarah Chen has already arranged meetings with the police department regarding the embezzlement charges and with the managing partners at Morrison and Associates. Once they see this evidence, the legal consequences will be swift. "And Leonard?" I asked. "What about the divorce?" "Sarah will file papers on Monday as well," Raymond said. "With this evidence, you'll have grounds for fault-based divorce with adultery as the cause. Montana law will entitle you to a significant portion of the marital assets, especially considering Leonard's misuse of marital funds." Leonard stood up, moving toward me with his hands outstretched. "Dottie, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but our marriage, we can save it. I don't want a divorce. I don't want to lose you." I stepped back, away from his touch. "You already lost me, Leonard. The moment you kissed Madison Reeves. The moment you decided she was worth more than our 46 years together. The moment you chose lies over truth, betrayal over loyalty, selfishness over love." "I do love you," Leonard insisted, desperation clear in his voice now. "I love you and Madison both. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could have both." "You can't," I said firmly. "That's not how love works. Real love doesn't divide itself between a wife and a mistress. Real love doesn't require lies and deception. Real love doesn't steal from the people it's supposed to protect." Marcus sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. "This is going to destroy everything. My career, my reputation, my children." "You destroyed those things yourself," Felicia said, her voice breaking but strong. "Every time you chose Madison over Emma and Tyler. Every time you stole money to buy her gifts instead of saving for their college. Every time you lied to their faces about where you were going and what you were doing. You're not the victim here, Marcus. You're the perpetrator." For the next hour, we laid out everything, every piece of evidence, every legal consequence, every way their actions had hurt the people who loved them. Sarah explained the divorce proceedings, the criminal charges Marcus would face, the civil suits that would follow. She explained how their assets would be divided, how custody would work, how their lives were about to change dramatically. Leonard kept trying to talk to me privately, to explain, to beg for forgiveness. I refused. There was nothing left to say between us that hadn't already been said. Marcus oscillated between denial, anger, and despair. He threatened to fight the charges, then pleaded for mercy, then blamed Madison for manipulating him, then insisted he was in love with her and couldn't give her up. "You don't have a choice," Sarah told him bluntly. "Madison Reeves will be questioned as part of the investigation. When she realizes you're facing criminal charges and you can't support her anymore, she'll disappear. Women like her always do." At noon, Sarah stood up and began packing her briefcase. Gentlemen, I suggest you both retain lawyers immediately. The paperwork will be filed tomorrow morning. Leonard, you have 30 days to move out of the marital home. Marcus, the police will likely want to speak with you by Tuesday at the latest. After Sarah left, it was just the four of us, 2 marriages destroyed, 2 families shattered, sitting around the dining room table where we'd shared so many Sunday dinners. I need you both to leave now, I said quietly. Leonard, you can stay at a hotel tonight. Start looking for an apartment. Marcus, go home with Felicia and figure out how you're going to tell your children what you've done. Mom, Marcus said, tears streaming down his face now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I fell in love with her and I couldn't stop myself. You could have stopped yourself, I said, my voice hard. At any point over the past 2 years, you could have chosen your wife and children over your mistress. You could have chosen integrity over deception. You could have been the man I raised you to be. But you didn't. Leonard tried one more time. Dottie, please. Just give me a chance to make this right. I'll end things with Madison. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't throw away our entire marriage over this. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The man I'd married 46 years ago would never have done these things. That man had died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. It's already over, Leonard, I said softly. Our marriage ended the day you decided to betray it. I'm just the only one who's willing to admit it. In the weeks that followed, everything unfolded exactly as Sarah had predicted. Marcus was arrested and charged with embezzlement. He lost his job, his accounting license, and eventually was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The house at Willow Creek Road was seized as proceeds of crime. Madison Reeves, when questioned by police, claimed she'd had no idea Marcus had bought the house with stolen money. She claimed Leonard had told her it was a gift from his savings. She claimed both men had pursued her relentlessly and she'd simply gotten caught up in complicated relationships she didn't know how to escape. No one believed her, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge her with conspiracy. She moved back to Seattle within a month, leaving Riverside Falls and the Blackwell men behind without a backward glance. Leonard fought the divorce initially, but when the evidence of his affair became public, he gave up. Our house was sold, the proceeds divided according to Sarah's negotiations. I got 70% due to Leonard's misuse of marital funds. Leonard moved to a small apartment on the other side of town, became a pariah at the senior center, and lost most of his friends. Felicia divorced Marcus and got full custody of Emma and Tyler. The kids were devastated, but with therapy and support, they're beginning to heal. They visit their father in prison once a month, trying to maintain some relationship despite everything he's done. As for me, I'm 71 now. I live in a small condo overlooking Peterson Lake. Felicia and I have Sunday dinners together with Emma and Tyler. We've become closer through our shared trauma, forming a family based on honesty and genuine love rather than pretense and lies. I still make soup sometimes, but now I make it for myself, for Felicia and the kids, for the actual homeless shelter where I volunteer every other week. The soup goes to people who truly need it, given freely without lies or hidden agendas. I'm not going to lie and say I'm happy. I'm not. I'm a 71-year-old divorced woman whose 46-year marriage ended in spectacular betrayal. My relationship with my son is destroyed, Marcus and I barely speak, and I don't know if we ever will again. My retirement looks nothing like what I'd planned. But I'm free. I'm living in truth instead of lies. I'm surrounded by people who genuinely love me rather than people who use me. And I've learned that dignity and self-respect are worth more than comfort and false security. Looking back, I wish I'd followed Leonard that very first Wednesday 3 years ago. I wish I'd questioned his stories, noticed the inconsistencies, trusted my instincts. Maybe if I'd caught them earlier, less damage would have been done. But I also know that the problem wasn't my vigilance, it was their choices. They chose betrayal. They chose deception. They chose to destroy their families for selfish desires. And I chose to stop enabling them. To anyone reading this story, anyone who suspects their partner might be lying, anyone who feels like something is wrong but can't quite prove it, trust yourself. Investigate. Ask questions. Don't let people make you feel crazy for seeking truth. And if you discover betrayal, know that you have choices. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to forgive it. You don't have to sacrifice your dignity to keep a family together that was built on lies. You can choose yourself. You can choose truth. You can choose to rebuild your life with integrity.